Welcome back. We're gonna go through some really cool stuff I've been finding, so here we go. Hope you're acquainted, but for a little reference, we're talking about the global flood and tracing its currents on the earth, which I've been doing for 400 episodes with shallograms, but and deducing things. So, like, let's just get to it. Some of the currents are flowing here this way. There's an eddy. There's a bunch of eddies. While the global flood was happening, it was on an Earth that the continents were physically adjacent as a single landmass with a smaller radius. And then the global flood happened, which caused the Earth to expand to a new radius, which dates geologically from 541 Precambrian time frame, late Precambrian, to basically the end of the Ice Age. So that's what we're looking at. We've documented all sorts of really cool things. For example, that Hawaii formed as a sphere. As ridiculous as it sounds, it is just so integral to my research at this point, where the physical land masses of the islands around, like the seamount around it, removing the landslides, like pushing this back, but just basically ignoring it, taking the land mass that we see, these as one over here, and then this as one, which is actually positioned here. So this is actually positioned relative to this here. And then I just put it up here. I know it looks kind of weird, but that's what's going on. This is where this overlays the actual position that is. This is over here in reality. And then the big island is over here in reality. So, and then A and B are related to the types of volcanism. These chains, I don't even remember the topic anymore. Just that there's some kind of relationship across them this way, but then when it's on the sphere, they're also in like a manner where they like wrap around like this wraps around this way, so like rings. Okay. And then 4 to 4, so there's like a chakra, there's even a little chakra thing here, which is underneath the 4, but a little point that sticks out, chakra there, that then was attached to here. And then 5 is attached here still, so this is still there in reality. So 5 stayed attached, even though 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, all this separated. 5 basically stayed in the same position. And then 6, pretty similar as well. And then 15 is where they all actually wrapped around and met one another on the opposing side of the sphere, because it was a sphere. And the surface of the islands was the internal surface of the sphere, not the external surface of the sphere. When it broke up, it basically, the outer surface rolled and deposited the inner crust on the top. And then the sphere that was forming in the flood, literally, it formed in the flood. This sphere contained magma, because it was undercurrents. There's literally 540 Precambrian to basically present includes the Siberian traps, it includes the Deccan traps, it includes basically the vast majority of large igneous provinces on Earth, especially like a lot of evidence ones, the ones that are older, not as much evidence exists anymore, but the ones during the flood particularly are more prevalent presently on the earth, and we talk about them with regularity, all of which happened during the flood. One of the things that happened, though, was a physical sphere formed in an eddy of the flood. Essentially, the currents all came to a general location that then had an eddy forming that then concentrated material to literally form a nucleus of a sphere that had magma contained within it. Is what I was mentioning. That is not in the whole sphere. Like, these islands, volcanoes, are extinct. I believe there might be some. I wonder if maybe like this is still. I don't know. I'm pretty sure they're all extinct. It's been a while since I really looked at the technical details after establishing Hawaii was a sphere. Like, in the details, though. I was in the details. All sorts of technical papers. You can look through my Hawaii playlist for more information of how it just like kind of was like, I think it was a sphere, and then me like looking into all the details to see if it's possible. Like, could this possibly like explain the data? Is it possible this explains the data? It explains the data. And all sorts of other things. But the point is, it had magma that was basically contained in the base of the sphere. Like if there's a sphere like Earth, like gravitationally pulling it to generally concentrate to one side is what appears to have happened. And at least as it broke up, maybe. But like, this was a pole, all sorts of other things that essentially it was like a bowl, and then there was like a what's that word? Torso, like a torso, arms, torso region, and then a head region. So like the legs with the base, torso, head, like physically having a shape of like a W, doing this seemingly like a process that regularly occurs, because I've come across this shape more once I saw it and thought of it as like related to a sphere. I'm like, anyway, I don't want to get too sidetracked. Very, very small aspect of what we're going to look at today is just the like reality of the situation that this sphere formed and was part of the process. And like, here's the orange of Hawaii, big island down here, Pu'u, Maui. I don't even remember how to say them. Sphere, but where I guess I don't have like the point of them all meeting is, I guess, here where they all kind of converge. But that's happening elsewhere than here. Then there's these currents. Let's go to currents. How do I even do this? Maybe this one. This one looks pretty good. So currents coming down, maybe it would just be even better to just talk over top Google Earth before I go into the details, but an eddy over Hudson Bay that's going over this way and out this way, but also I believe there's a in this way going to the center here that goes there. We'll talk about a little bit. And maybe in like opposition to this. Path. But then a current going down this way, getting squeezed, because essentially, sorry, it's kind of, there's just so many details. I'm like, oh my god, how do I summarize this? There's essentially current going through between North America and South America that are cutting the continents apart. Anywhere the continents sever is because a current went between them with enough, like, currents flowing everywhere because it's a global flood that are running into each other that then begin to flow like in opposition at a boundary, and at that boundary there's just continuously running into each other even though they're flowing along each other. Like if you could zoom in, maybe like Jupiter, maybe like at the boundary of the currents where they're running into each other, there's just the one below goes up and in, but then is going into a current going the other way. So it wraps around with the current, but then like it's still being fed by the other current. So it essentially just eddies there where the other one does the same. And that leads to vibrations in like an up down into the earth, basically cutting the earth. It leads to cutting the earth. And the earth then got cut apart, forming the continents based on the global flood process. Let's hit that there. And so these are some of the currents, and we'll come back to these soon, so this one's not too important. And then off of North America is worth looking at. So as we go off of North America, there's this eddy, and then flow going down this way that specifically goes in along the Andes here, but like within the channel this way to join this current. There's a current going this way wrapping around, but more detail I've realized since this. Current coming off of Africa going this way onto South America, and more details since looking at this. Like since this today, there's lots of more details we came across relating to this area, but it still has the general thing going on, which is it's almost like different layers of the atmosphere where like the same general trends exist, but then different shapes take form across different depths and then different flows, even to a point where it like has different structures at different elevations, depths, whatever. Elevations, wrong way. But so this goes this way, like it doesn't just eddy here, it also goes across this way, seemingly, where this goes into an arc this way off of North America, but also other details that we'll get into going this way, which then runs into the current off of Africa. So it basically bends back, leading to like a thing doing like this, which then can lead to cutting, which then leads to like boundaries like this kind of thing, because it's doing things like that then are running into actually high pressure currents. Like it's not just like a subtle stream, it's enough energy that is like cutting and doing really lifting going underneath even and pulling, bringing things, going through the material, not just atop the, like, it's not like just earth, water. It's like earth, water. Maybe like even like this. So it's like through it. So when the water is moving, it's also moving the physical earth. More so the oceanic crust, it seems. As it was forming that, it seems. In some interaction with the mantle of the water, though. But then it essentially deflects the current from Africa southward because there's generally more pressure to the north. So it generally deflects it south. Instead of it doing this way, it does it the other way. And that leads to portions of the Africa current going that way as well, which then just generally leads to this corner in the Andes, as well as the structure of the Andes, because it goes into pressure, which I didn't draw here, but this is like the main area of today's video, is this region, which just kind of, I'm not sure that came into it really. And then this, I didn't really go this far south and east, but this is still like part of what we're going to talk about. I don't think I would change this. That essentially it's doing this. Having currents going this way into some kind of pressure around Antarctica, basically. That the strong current around the boundary made the furthest, and then the weaker ones didn't quite make it as far, and they started to branch off more sooner, which then led to this kind of like resulting distribution of the flow to then go back across. And then this is in Asia, which is current going across this way. From generally over here, just like across this way. Somewhere over here. Through this area. Possibly even further south. Like along this thing, this direction. Going in that way and in and across, generally across here with cross currents. But across here, cross currents to then go across Africa. So this is just part of what's going across Africa. And then this over here is coming from North America, basically across the North Pole region, to then run over here to interact with other currents and create Lake Baikal and interact, create the boundary over here, and all sorts of stuff going on. And then current going off of South America onto Africa is then being deflected to join this current going back this way. Although I'm not completely sure about this anymore. I feel like it might go more across than I'm giving it credit for. This is almost like the dominant, like the zooming out, like the most overwhelming current that had the most impact generally on the area kind of thing, which would anyway, let's get to today's stuff. I'll have to think about details. Certainly nothing is like complete, finished in its final form without any need for more inspection. Okay, so oddly, I was typing like at the end, and everything I typed just disappeared, and I just posted, and then apparently I typed, oh no. Anyway, I thought that was interesting enough to talk about for no reason. So we're looking at Peru, or Ecuador, sorry, Ecuador. Possibly also Peru, I guess. Sorry, Peru. Sorry, Peru. I guess more so Peru. In what this image is like. Where is the boundary of Peru? So Peru goes pretty much to there. Something in this area. So interestingly, this structure that we're going to talk about here. So let me just read this real quick. Is split between Peru and Ecuador to finish the thought, but I thought this region where the Hawaiian Sphere once was looked quite revealing like this from this angle, rather than like the typical angle. Like seeing things from different angles just helps. Just it's harder to fit this in. Like I want to look at the most of the boundary, so just not to like be like, what are you telling me this for, dude? Anyway, what might it show, I wonder? Immediately an ammonite is visible. So let's just go forward. Immediately an ammonite is visible, complete with a cross current through the Andes. So some kind, what I was thinking when I wrote this is a current going through the ammonite structure that tends to go through like this. It just tends to do that, where it cuts through it like this. It also has like a low area and then like a high area, kind of divided, looking like a chunk of an ammonite rather than a complete ammonite. Also was wondering if there's maybe like spokes outward from this the chakra region here of the ammonite. Might be somewhat, but it's not like that prominent. Then I said marked in red in this region is a region that caught my eye. Like a current was pressuring exactly the area only. So some kind of current was pressuring here. So I'm like, that's interesting. Because I haven't really thought about this area in particular like this. It's just like, that's where the Hawaiian Sphere was. That's where the secondary mantle puncture hole was. This location was also this location, which was also this location. And that location was also this location, is now basically this location. And from here, it radiated a stream northward through here to then accrete all this material over here and to then have a jet stream going into here that actually brought the sphere of Hawaii underneath Alaska this way and through this chunk of underlying material and caving it in and leaving it behind as the Alaskan Russian like material swung out from the North Pole as Hawaii went through here to over here through this region to over here, which was actually here, and swung out that way to over here, and then went down this way and over this way, and all sorts of things happening in the process. But that current going up that way is very related to this location. That's what I know about it. I haven't really looked at it until this post, at least, besides some like other details that are not of this nature. Okay, so then I put the pressure points in again here. There seems to be some kind of pressure point specifically down here, so just to look at it. Like in here, along this margin pretty much. Into here. Just current that was applying a pressure but then running into resistance, so it could not push further as easily. But it looks like it did so in like an arc here. And it even has all these little indentations like that parrot, like this goes along this boundary. Are we gonna talk about that? This goes along this boundary. This goes to like where that is. Like this is like a fanning arc seashell looking thing that points though right here, suggestive that there's a pressure of current flowing in here to a point where it runs into resistance. But then around that is that there's this like that is part of this eddy here that we already recognize like actually is happening. So it's still going by, it's just not doing it easily because there's a cross current. So then if I continue, say wait a minute, I'm like hold up, okay, there's these lines here. So if we go out a little further, these things like this right, this one here and this one basically point into this crevice as if there was some like higher velocity through this that was flowing into here, like a focus beam that was flowing right here, but it had like a also focus beam but not as fast current flowing in bands around it kind of thing. That then the central current eroded the most here, but then this one like pressured some like the boundary of it, maybe even the current just outside of it, wrapped into here and ran into this. But then I'm like, this shape where it has almost like teeth to it downward, like 3 teeth looking things maybe, where it is itself one with another one here. Sorry, I'm kind of like out of it maybe. Sorry if I'm not like the fastest at conveying ideas right now. So it essentially is like another lobe outward of the ammonite structure from here. So it looks like there's even a bigger eddy, really. But that made me think, wait a minute. There's this, but then what's going on over here? It's almost like as it like runs in here, runs in, and then over time it kind of builds into an actual flow rate this way. And it's not doing an eddy, it's just using the eddy to redirect that way, pretty much. And so that's what this is. And that's when I'm like, wait, there's actually a chakra type structure coming in of some pressure here that's running into this current that also has another current going the other way. So essentially some current is flowing into this area and dividing off of another current going across this way, like very much related to the Amazon. And forming a chakra type structure that like points at it with the Amazon as like one of the sides of the chakra. Chakra, maybe I should just like give an example, being like have a tiered narrowing structure to a point like this, a chakra. So having a tiered narrowing structure to a point, chakra, both sides doing that with, and it tends to do it with like multiple layers. So there's a chakra on one side, there's another current, so there's basically currents flowing directly into one another. One of them is being pushed by currents from North America to then flow southward. So the one into South America is then being forced to flow southward rather than northward and interact with the more southward flowing current of this eastward flowing pressure into South America, at least modern eastward, that is then applying a pressure here. And this current, though, divides as well. So part of it goes south, part of it goes north, and it divides basically at the ammonite structure. So there's one side that's a chakra inlet pressure from this current going into this region. There's another side that is the dividing current going northward, but like swinging in actually, so maybe going southward, but being like a portion of this current going southward, but that got first pushed north, kind of thing, to then like swing in like that. But the point is, it's dividing to have some of it go north, some of it go south. The portion that goes south essentially hugs like a certain boundary. It doesn't especially go like all the way into this area, for example. It more so kind of like creates a boundary along generally here is my interpretation, or somewhere like that, where then it like continues to hug that boundary down here. Whereas the other current from over here runs into all of this, and a portion of it filters in just right at the chakra, into the Andes, to the west of the Andes, to fill this area, because there's pressure of currents flowing into it, to fill it with water, more and more water, but then there's pressure from both sides as this flows down the coastline, basically down the Andes, through the Andes, as pressure from both sides, so it's shaping the whole region, but flowing specifically like through this area. I guess through here. To then join the flow along the coastline, though, and maybe on the Altiplano generally, like in the elevated plains of the Andes. But then where there's like more than one inlet, so the chakra has current going, so it reminds me of this chakra over here that we talked about. I believe we talked about this. I hope we talked about this. I believe we talked about this chakra here. It has one side really defined with a point up here. But the other side actually branches off sideways and it's kind of weird looking. If we didn't talk about this, I'll be talking about this in the next episode-ish, probably. I'll check, and then I'll talk about it. It's not too important. Here's a chakra that's pointing this way. But it has this weird tendency, and when I saw that, it didn't really like occur to me what might be going on, but then I keep seeing it, where in this case, it's flowing in, it has a boundary, but opposite over here, flowing in this way, where then the other way, there's this current going off this way, through this region. But then it keeps doing it, so like it kind of forms a chakra, like it's the Amazon forming a chakra, but then it starts to like take this shape too, not just like a narrow point here to like exactly there. I guess the Amazon almost makes it point like exactly at the nucleus with this wall, like, dude. But then if we like take this wall, it kind of has like a shape of a chakra still, like throughout, like it kind of looks like it just continuously getting more chakra-y, but then it fans out this way, where this side it keeps going, which indicates the flow is running into resistance up here and then branching off multiple times to go through this way as well, to go out there and into here, and to go through here as well into here. So like portions of the current are just continuously branching off sideways and going in here as well, probably. At which point, more and more water has filled this space. Over here, only this much, but then more inlet, so it gets wider. Another inlet gets wider. Another inlet gets wider. Another inlet, and then it's at its widest, and then it kind of looks like, I guess, it starts exhausting by the turbulence of all the what's going on over here. So maybe it starts narrowing as well. Narrowing, and then like a lot of it goes over here, some of it goes down that way, and it starts actually dividing the direction that it's going. Or going down there is more even like a later turn, where it turns in this way rather than turning in like there. It turns even later to a point where it actually differentiates by going over this way instead. I don't believe this is going north. I believe this is going south and south. Kind of like happened in the Rockies, where the Hudson Bay has an eddy going this way, applying a pressure into the Rockies that's flowing southward though along the boundary, and then another current flowing southward along the boundary, which would seem like they'd just be like, alright, cool, let's hang out, run into each other with enough interaction to actually compress, and due to different flow rates to actually be different. Like, nah, you're kind of in my way, I'm going really fast. Yeah, you're going the same way, but you're going so slow about it, like, that kind of thing. Versus going literally different directions and being in the same path. So they form mountains or divide over here, I guess. When there's space to flow for the slower currents to flow out here, maybe. Almost getting shoved out of the way by the fast current. Alright, we'll get out of the way. We'll go. Going this way. We are going over this way. And then the fast current just shoots off of Anubis's spine out of his crown chakra. Shout out, Gary. Okay. So this is going on, and I'm just like, cool. That's pretty cool. So here's the chakra. Here's the current paths. I guess I did this, so I should probably do the thing. But here we go. And then I'm like, okay, where is this coming from? This current that's running into here. Well, good thing I've already associated this point with this point. I believe it's right here. It's a lot harder to like. I believe it's there. It might be like there. It's in the magnetic anomaly map. For some reason it needs the caps. This place. It is loading. This place. This here. Here's the ammonite, especially visible in Australia. The Australian ammonite, especially visible in the magnetic anomaly map, that is. That then is the mother that gave birth to the sphere of Hawaii that then moved over here out of the womb of the ammonite, like a decay product of this huge system, pretty much moved over here and hung out here because it ran into other resistances until it could get out, at which point it moved out this way. But this point was actually all the way over here. Which if we follow it back along like this boundary to here, and then like this, maybe to here, like this area, cross here, boop, like it's still pointing there. So this location, the mantle was punctured again, is how I interpret it. A major focal point of energy that was like stacked where this was below it, probably. Maybe this was below it too. And this was like at the top interacting. Something of that nature. But then they're in line, and I'm like, well, I already actually kind of looked at this a little bit. Like, off of that point, there seems to be this structure. Well, mind you, there's the eddy over here. But a structure of a current flow that's like running into resistance. It's like trying to go through here, probably because there's pressures everywhere around it. And current is pushing more current into this region, into this space, where like exhaust is flowing along this way because it just can't all get in, but it's getting so forced in that it's actually forming like a pathway like this to then shoot a beam that like actually kind of makes its way even more to a focal point of where Hawaii was over there. So like here's the the structure that then has like this node, the chakra type thing. Notice one side's more like arced or more flattened out, while the other side is more arced like a chakra. And then it's got this section here that then points to there. And this had current just flowing apparently. This is kind of a new development as of these realizations, specifically off of Australia, eastward in modern Australia's position, and into what at the time was this location. And it ended up like propagating a current this way to open as another current went like above it, so multiple directions, which then was causing cutting and severing the South and North America, but not completely, because pressures were such that that's what happened. But so this was the mechanism putting current into specifically Ecuador. So I just kind of included that there. Then I kept going. So to Ecuador, filled outflow exhaust, ammonite eddy here. I'm not completely sure. I need to think about this one some more, because there's current coming in from north, like between North America and South America, going westward, that then is running into Papua New Guinea, pretty much, and like from essentially the western region of Papua New Guinea to down around here. There's like a pressure from pushing this way that then ends up like being across like here. Pressure across here now, but across this portion anyway. So that's probably why this was happening, because there was a pressure that was actually flowing in to Papua New Guinea and Solomon Islands, but when this was over here, flowing in this way, holding this region, so that a current, an eddy here, and other currents flowing eastward into this area couldn't quite get through, and then probably another current from over here, I guess. Similarly, I have in the past described a current flowing this way. Let's see. Down basically Eastern Africa, through the southern tip of Africa, and then into Western Antarctica, and across it to then come out into southeastern Australia. There's even an arc here in that kind of shape, suggestive the current is running into resistance there. So a current flowing in that way, like across here, and then into this area, applying a pressure here. Another current flowing this way, applying a pressure here, and then another current going this way, drilling through, laser beaming into this area, but meeting resistance because there is another current off of this path. Ding. Into the node of the ammonite specifically. Whereas this one's flowing here into the here, which then is creating like a yin-yang type thing. because they're broader than their focal points. Where the current off of Australia predominantly goes north, whereas the current off of Africa predominantly goes south. That would be my guess. I know it looks like it's a lot on the western side of the Andes if it were to do that, but it's because the current from Africa is actually filling in this region with more pressure as it crosses over to flow along that margin. Why exactly it would do that, I don't know. Maybe it does the same over here then. The Australian current crosses over by going in here where it mostly goes up here and like accretes material over here and flows around this way and into here, boom, creating the Indonesian archipelago, flowing across here, here, and wrapping around, but off of here, going back over this way, going across, into basically cutting through here, creating all these flows as the Pacific opened, and then partly, not enough to like dominate, but just partly going this way so as to like maintain a boundary here and push a boundary over here and fill the space. But because of counter pressures, I guess, like it maintained the connection. There's also current going along this way, so there must have been a pretty good pressure still. Okay, so then I said, curious if this pointed at Ecuador. So I just did this. Does this point at Ecuador? So part of me, as I do things like this, actually it points at the Caribbean. This is kind of part of why I was thinking, oh. Which then led me to say, well, I know there's a current going this way. Maybe the current that goes to the Caribbean kind of like splits and encourages current this way, at least. Maybe not itself going that way entirely, but also goes this way and maybe runs into resistance over here, but still like partly goes that way as well as running into a current going essentially east of Bermuda, so that there's an eddy around us between the two, an eddy around it that then runs into this current, that then they deflect off each other, where that one then goes north of the other and comes out over in this area, which is where it initially was, over here. Ooh, this used to be there as well. I didn't realize that. I did not realize that connection was there too. Right where the spray point off of the tip right there used to be over there. It almost makes me think like then a current like ran into here and then deflected off to go up along the western boundary of this area and holding generally this boundary and just going maybe to over there. Let's keep going though. And something going on with how the Caribbean formed, where like part of it did the opened, and then part of it opened, and it did like different things at different times, maybe. Unclear without closer inspection. And then I also said, well, where's this current coming from then? Like, it must be coming from somewhere. And then I thought it was curious that it now, even though we're looking at it like straight on kind of across here, it's more like this kind of angle, so it's like wrapping around, like, kind of thing. I thought that was interesting. But it points basically at the Horn of Africa, is what I said. So I said, similarly, thought I would extend this line westward if it was flowing eastward so linearly as to point at the Caribbean, where it passed through like above. So it wasn't just like flowing eastward linearly when it was drilling into the location in Ecuador and Peru. It was even seemingly traveling with enough vigor that it had like a linear relationship with the Caribbean. So I thought, well, that must have had a potent enough current that it was probably linear further too. So let's see. So then I kind of look back, and that's not the exit path throughout the yeah. Then I said it's the exit path of the Mediterranean. So like going this way, but not specifically the whole time, but like the end of the process. Once it got shifted further south from pressures of currents. So like a current that was going eastward at a higher latitude, never remember, higher position, a more northerly position. There we go, I did it. And then they started to get shifted by the pressure, so there's a current going down this way that's just pushing the boundary of this other current further and further south until it actually starts to go off of the continent and by off to a position that it cuts the continent apart because of the pressures and the flow rates of these currents getting basically compressed in certain regions to then go with high velocity and high turbulence to then cut things like that. And then do it again though, where it seems like related to there, but then it goes out that way. So I was thinking in a different way. Let's see what else I said. So then it fell off into the transitional region between Africa and Eurasia, where they were being cut apart, which is it fell off at the Red Sea, which then differentiates which is Africa and which is Asia. This strongly suggests that the current that passed through the Mediterranean, which also differentiates the two, Eurasia and Africa, went to Australia throughout the process as it moved away from India. Essentially this current was flowing into Australia, but then it continued to flow into Australia as Australia moved, and the flow like repositioned its direction as Australia moved. Because essentially these flows are being caused by the pressures that are then like changing. I have that saved, so whatever. We can just ignore everything here. I'm just gonna like just regions. Let's say region 1, region 2, and region 3. 1, 2, 3. And then between them, currents are flowing. But then let's say region 3 has current, start to fill it. So then region 1 gets like shoved by it to go kind of do something, and region 2 gets shoved by it down the, like, and maybe even, I don't know. Where like the currents are just changing. You get what I'm saying. The current that would have gone in, like let's say the North Pole is here and the South Pole is here. Now the North Pole is here and the South Pole is here. Let's say just where the current would have gone in, like near the North Pole, it's now running into this. So then it like moves down this way. But that like changes the way it's interacting with the things. Or for example, if it can't move down, then it would just cut. But this thing grew large, so anyway, for like Zealandia, like it can't quite get past it. It can't get down to some place, so it just cuts through. Actually cuts through and does things to the earth. Does things to the earth. This strongly suggests the current that passed through the Mediterranean went to Australia throughout the process as it moved away from India, applying an eastward pressure on to contain the eddy. Eastward pressure to contain the eddy that was forming the Pacific from all sides. So there's an eddy on Australia that fell into the Pacific. It's flowing on top of Australia. Everything's good. Then it starts cutting the boundaries. So like that, this is like an eddy, let's say. So, and that's I don't know. Let's do Australia itself. So an eddy here that then actually falls off. And like goes over to the Mariana Basin area. For this large eddy. I believe the large eddy goes from Australia to the East Mariana Basin. From on here, falls here, forms the Ontong Java Plateau because this is closed in here. So when it falls in here, it actually is forming the Ontong Java Plateau. And then this space later opens. Maybe it even like pushes the Ontong Java Plateau outward and continues here. I'm not sure. But then there's one here and here. Essentially, this forms when this forms. So it probably more so like quickly moved over here or spawned more eddies, I guess, probably actually. Not clear it's all the same eddy, I guess. I kind of figured it fell and went this way. But that generally happened around 120 million when the Ontong Java Nui complex was formed in the East Mariana Basin, which is the time of the Cretaceous normal superchron when all the magnetic field of the Earth remains stable for a like 120 million to 83 million radiometric dating, something like that, for a long period of time, known as the Cretaceous normal superchron, because that was when the Pacific was opening, when this and this used to be parallel until this opened between it. Which really changed things. Lots of things was happening. That's when the eddy fell off of Australia. As I will continue to say, even though I just, I'm like, oh, maybe it didn't fall off. Maybe it just kind of transferred energy off rather than fall off. Anyway, let's keep going. So then here's the current generally going from through the Mediterranean into where Australia used to be relative to India. Relative to India, Australia was over in that general position, not that shape, but then it got moved over to its current position 3 over there. And essentially by a change in the path from over here to like transitioning, I drew this as a sort of transitional path where this boundary is, and I kind of just related to that boundary. And then over here, which then I just kind of kept above here. So interestingly, above there, like if there's a flow going out this way that runs into resistance, goes this way. But generally across this span, it's kind of just like running into Australia. It's running into resistance, like the current flow's kind of getting cut off and shoved southward. But like it's kind of running into Australia. This is all the same plate. Suggestive a current was generally dominant there, like a single that way kind of thing. Although it's got a lot of detail because it's complex in the flows that were happening there, outflows from this way, seemingly running through here, and then basically forming an eddy here that some of it went out this way and then couldn't get out anymore, so it like hung out there and like squeezed between the layers to like shoot beams of current this way. It seems. That's my interpretation. Some of it got out this way, but like this is other currents really filling this space, where this one was probably more so exhausting through this area. Okay. So then I kept going, like, okay. This points, let's just see, there's the boundary of this points through basically the tip of Solomon Islands, which used to be over here. That's something. It points through the structure here that's right next to Fiji, through that. And it essentially points, though, at this area of South America that's kind of flattened, like a current was flowing. Imagine the Earth is expanding from a global flood. I know maybe you think it's ridiculous. Maybe you're just going on. Yeah, okay. And there's a lot of water flowing at a high flow rate around these boundaries too, but not just like at sea level, but actually like up along the continents, because the Earth is yet to expand to a large enough radius to accommodate the water, so it's flowing on top of the surface here along this margin, though, in a high enough flow rate that it's beyond what we presently almost can fathom. Like, it's the flood energies off of this boundary, though, and into South America, indenting the whole thing, etching the whole thing to have this straight margin here, even though it's like arced. If you see my Ancient Dwarka video, one of the curious things that I don't really have elsewhere is how, like, following this boundary and kind of ignoring the extension there, just following right there through to there, and then continuing, it really follows a phi ratio into here very well. Suggestive of a like arcing boundary, but then boom, indentation with a straight line. Suggestive of a current with a general width that it was relatively even enough that it could like do this even if it flows into it and then goes sideways and kind of eddies into resistance both ways and does that as far out as it can, and it just kind of erodes the margin, which is probably more so. It looks like they're going this way. It's pointing. If there's current going down this way, as this current's running into it, I guess it would generally bend it to the right, while still applying that pressure, though. Then I said, well, I don't know. When trying to line up the oceanic fracture zones, that's right, over here, I was like, what about these? What line can I make parallel to these? So I made a line parallel with it from specifically the same location over here that I just had it going this way. So it started here and went along this boundary, or whatever exactly it was, to go to the location we were just looking at. And now it goes, when trying to just align it with the actual, these things, it goes this way, which I thought was interesting because it basically goes to the boundary of Papua New Guinea now, and then to this boundary. That's kind of interesting. I don't know. And it gives a suggestion of some kind of like region of influence off of this boundary where like currents not just wrapping around, let's say, and going like this way. It's like it really is going atop the crust and going it's still wrapping off of the resistance of the crust because it's water, so it would flow into the ocean if it could, but it's not doing it with enough like rapid resistance to it because of pressures, that it is actually fanning out to go even further that way, it seems. That's kind of how it, what it suggests to me, that there is that relationship over there to like boundaries like this, which are not, this is not the only place we run into these like types of boundaries. Then I said, well, what if I point at this? And same location. What ends up happening to point at that, to point at the secondary mantle puncture hole location, where it has to go this way. And interestingly, again, kind of like here, fanning out, but the other way, it goes atop the bird head here with the beak, atop the bird head, relatively, and then generally to whatever the beginning of, I believe this is Nauru Basin here, the beginning of this like crevice in Ontong Java, and then to the top northern segment of Manihiki Plateau, which is interesting enough that I'm like, okay, just kind of noted. And then if we continue it though, just like Manihiki, it kind of goes to the top and goes right through a little bit, this path. Similarly, like the path from there to here goes a little bit through this structure over here. Like, huh, okay. And then when I do this, going back to the first image, where we went through the location near Fiji, it goes to the boundary here, which I don't know if I had that in there. This one. This image, just further out, goes to this boundary. So then again, we kind of are on both sides of this thing. Maybe not that side there. Although now I wonder if something goes to there, but then I said, okay, little changing subject. At this point, I'm just kind of looking around. I still haven't really found like the conclusions of what we're talking about. We're just kind of going through these. And I tried to, I'm like, well, what else can I see if I just draw these lines? Now I'm wondering, what about over here? But if I kind of follow this boundary, so there's multiple boundaries. I followed down here, I followed right here, so like there's a bend. So I follow specifically after the bend and before the bend, and as well as this boundary where it's more straight here. So just following this, I was like, what does that point at? Does it point at like where the Hawaiian Islands start? That would be cool. What does it point at? So I followed it, and it actually points at the North Pole. I mean, this line does. You tell me if it like matches parallel with this. It's kind of hard. You can say, well, if you include this portion, it's not there, kind of thing. But like, there's a pretty large length that generally is parallel with this, that I feel encompasses before it bends back to be part of Fiji. To then just follow it north, it literally goes to not just the North Pole, but the region that the Hawaiian Sphere went through, the Chukchi Plateau, en route to the North Pole. As well as it happens to go between the chakras of Alaska and Russia. Like, okay, that's interesting. Then I was like, okay, what about this line? And that one we can see already points at the main islands of Hawaii. That's something. It also kind of follows the, like, parallels the boundaries of Manihiki. interesting as well. But if we follow it further, it goes over here. I don't know what to make of that exactly. Not sure. So I mentioned points just north of there. I was thinking, does it point at Silesia over here? And it points north of there to a region just west of where the Juan de Fuca plate is, as if the western margin extent is potentially related. So, like, essentially, because the current's coming in, like, over here, or because it's pointing at over here, let's say there's some current relating, whether it's coming off of or into here from over there, it could be providing some sort of margin to what's going on with the Juan de Fuca plate, where like it would be that boundary, essentially what I was getting at. I don't know why exactly. I didn't know what to make of like where it's pointing at. Typically, it's pointing at something I have like found significant for some particular reason that's not necessarily recognized by modern science, which is cool that happens, but this one, I don't know what to make of it. It probably has a significance. I just don't know what to make of it, especially given how far Hawaii got. Basically, like, Hawaii was rolling like a sphere does, rolling along, but it broke apart in the currents, and then it really broke apart over here. But maybe it was running into some kind of resistance of a current that, like, spanned across there. Like, it spanned over to the North Pole initially, but then it got pushed to then kind of push it this way until it actually kind of rolls even more this way to then probably actually push Manihiki away from Ontong Java. Like, Manihiki was more over here, and then it just widens off of this by Hawaii going through there. But pushing the boundary to then do this. Seems like it's running into some kind of resistance that has like literally like running into a 2x4 that then has 2 points it's attached to. One of them is over here. This one flexes down. This one more so holds its position, but maybe erodes as well from the pressures. As it's pushing through, though. Seems plausible. Actually gives me the impression that maybe as it's rolling this way, it's doing the same thing into over here and over here. Okay. So then I did this up this way. Sorry. The more linear, not hugging this boundary, but instead more straight. So this one goes to the North Pole, this boundary. This one goes to the place where the Hawaiian sphere went into the North Pole this way, so which was here when this happened. So this was here. It got moved over here. It was in line with here. This widened out here. And Alaska literally got moved in the energy of this. That's how much energy is involved with what's going on here. This beam of current flowing northward. And that is then getting pushed sideways here as Hawaii rolls into this, like, actual beam of current. And it moves this area westward. So it's not in the position anymore. It moves it out of this position. Based on here, though. Crazy. And I just included this map. Then I was like, okay. Well, what about just New Zealand? Trying to generally divide New Zealand. Just kind of draw a line off of the divided New Zealand. Let's see what happens, and voila, I found it. That's when I was like, I found it. I knew one of these would point there. I knew something would be pointing at Silesia and Rangelia and all the things going on over here. Something had to be pointing related to this. It was the actual New Zealand, which very rapidly is not in line with this. Where it was essentially a backstop. The currents flowing into and away from, so as to essentially spray current. So there's that. That one. Okay, back to the currents. Okay, back to some currents. This is more so what I want to share. It's just I made a lot of posts in this thread. So I'm like, okay, let's go out a little further. So now we got this going on. We got the current running in over here, deflecting. Going this way, deflecting south. The current coming in as a chakra, deflecting and fanning out sideways. Very reminiscent of, actually, now that I think about it, where is it? Where is it? I just... Oh yeah, okay, it's gotta be in there. It's definitely in this one. Here it is. This. With the arm out and the currents going the one way. But then the arcing, maybe this is like a chakra. And that's what this makes me think of over here, with the current coming in and then branching off this way. And then we added from North America, going through there, going off there, but then it's like, wait a minute. Wait a minute, so let's imagine this current is more generally a current flowing eastward, holding a boundary. And it's running into South America here, deflecting and running into this current, really running into this current. It's not really so much about running into South America until it starts to cut the continents apart, and then it starts to like run into. And then as they space apart, then it really starts to run into, so that the currents are actually running into the sides of the continents rather than flowing atop them, more so. So once that happens, it's running into the side of and deflecting off of, but also deflecting off of this current and going up northward, but then it's deflecting into other pressures. So there's pressure up here too. So it runs into that pressure and it deflects around. Where really the green, white, red, these are all the same over here. Just kind of differentiating based on regions. And then where my thought is, like this area opens here, so a current's flowing across, running into resistance that then leads to an opening, because essentially this current ramps up, goes up, can't go, goes up, goes up, goes up, starts running into itself over here, runs into itself, so it wraps in further and further until it actually is going back the other way and fills in this space with a countercurrent that is actually creating like wedges in the space to then actually open, creating like a actual wedge to then deflect the current off of it. So this is going on over here, where there's this, and then like a teardrop looking thing in the Galapagos hotspot region and the Galapagos Islands. So I'm like, okay, so we got that going on. Some more, but then I'm like, okay, I think it's going through, and I think it's going through at this width, where then another current is going eastward, because I know there's, or westward, there's another westward propagating current going through this region. That I'm confident about. So, like, it must be there, so I, especially over here. So I just kind of incorporated the currents of this region we already mentioned, where there's an eddy down here, into this. Like, okay, so that goes with it. And then it, like, this kind of goes up. Suggestive that maybe it ran into it. Like, currents flowing this way ran into this enough to deflect up and create an eddy here. Even though there's current just going across. Just going across, generally speaking, like through a tiny chakra point though, because this current's going this way and wrapping into it and up and around, and this current's going down and wrapping into there and running off of it and going up that way. This current's cutting across as well, so there's all sorts of things going on here and going into this region and into there, interacting with that current. And then over here, it's deflecting off of Papua New Guinea. So if we follow from here to here, here, that one, to generally here, just follow it. Across this width. It's pretty much the size of the Ontong Java Plateau. And it goes to the nose of Solomon Islands and the far side of Papua New Guinea. But the nose of Solomon Islands really kind of relates back to the rest of Papua New Guinea, which was folded in here. So really, like, it's along this boundary. Doop, doop, like doop, doop, is a mass forming. And it seems like off of the corner, my thought is, because there's this eddy like this, that there's actually a current's flowing in, but then some of it runs into resistance and branches sideways, both directions away, so it doesn't matter, but then inward, so it actually collides with itself by going boop, boop at the resistance, where then it just comes back to then form another back current down the center, back through from the way it came because it has nowhere else to go, and it joins this eddy over here, which probably is why this eddy is really happening in part, at least. Or some stage of its development. So then there's that. And I said, okay, this though, this hotspot area, where there's this current going through and wrapping back up into resistance and wrapping back and filling a wedge, it kind of looks like this area, where there's a current below and above, and then what looks to be a boundary where it goes up and pushes back, and then another segment where it ramps off it. So it goes around, pushes back, and basically does something like this, where there's a lower current that runs into resistance and wraps around and forms an eddy. And then there's an upper current that physically ramps off of the eddy and flows upward. And in this case, runs into resistance and maybe fills over here. Do like a step thing, maybe, where maybe then this eddy could extend on top of that if this like felt enough pressure to create like an offshooting current, if there was enough flow into this, etc. And I just thought this in general reminded me of this structure, where there's a bend, a eddy type thing, let's say, a circular thing with a sort of wedge above it, even on top of it, and then above it though, right there, and then above that is this anticline, which kind of is like a finger almost, very reminiscent of this. So I'm like, huh. I don't know what to make of it with regard to this. It just reminds me of this. Then I drew some more. These are kind of losing the details over on the western coast of North America, but now we're more so looking at east. So we've got an eddy centered on Hudson Bay that then kind of pushes boundaries down here to the south with the currents here. But then that current is interacting, I believe, with this red current. That is like a boundary current that we'll get into, mainly because this is like a chakra that points to here. Is a flow for sure off of Africa. There's literally a flow off of Africa that my interpretation is then runs into resistance and bends and basically gets deflected in by this shape over here to generally go through a channel over this way, through a chakra, to get between the Americas. And then because of that, that would suggest there's like different tiers of the chakra, not just like not just like above it like this, but literally this is a good example. We've got a tier upward, up, 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 up to a peak, and then over here, but then we also have another side here that's actually inward. So it's like different tiers sideways. We even see another tier out here, another tier out here where it's like different shadows of recessive and dominant forms of the chakra taking shape, basically. But that's going on here as well, it seems. Which then gave me the impression that this red one probably is another like layer outward that then was actually cutting in here and creating an eddy here. Then exhaust off of out of Hudson Bay. And I kind of purposely didn't continue that trolling these because I realized I got some things to think about some more. But then there's this chakra. So imagine we've got one chakra going in here and then fanning off sideways down south. And we've got another chakra going in here, but it's not fanning off south. Maybe it's fanning off north, I thought. So if there's flow going in here, fanning off north, I mean, maybe like it's cutting through here kind of thing, basically. And then again, like a general like tier inward chakra that's more narrow, that's specifically coming off of Africa and specifically going between Florida and Cuba. And then into Pacific, where it's running into other currents at the Australian Ammonite. But notably, flow onto South America. I like, I'll try to differentiate it. Like, there's especially here, the way this is, it's just flowing onto South America without much deflection from South America. And the further north we go, especially the further west the lines are looked at, the more the deflection appears to be. Although here it looks like it just might have wrapped around and then got overlain from the other way. But ultimately getting directed up to the chakra here and through here. So then we've got a chakra here, maybe another kind of chakra there from it. Chakra up here too, and just the shape. Okay. I only have this much. So abruptly we have reached the end of my images that I made today / maybe yesterday. Holy crap, it's 2:30 in the morning. Alright guys, peace out.